So welcome everyone to the third and final Meet the Expert session of the Hybrid Asterousia University that has been taking place in Asterousia Biosphere Reserve as a live session and in the last 3 weeks as an online session. We have been talking this year about the integrated water resources management. We presented the framework of the SDGs, various UNESCO programs. In the previous week, we talked a little bit more about specific, more technical issues of water management and the hydrology sides. And this final week, we focus on education. So we're talking about education for sustainable development, about water projects and how they can be implemented in UNESCO sites and in general. So it's a more, this final week, it's a more rounded week and closing the whole university. So let me start with a mini presentation on the updates so far in this course. I think you can see my screen. We are happy to have in this third week together with us Bernard Combe from UNESCO, but also Samuel from UNESCO Venice. Thank you for being here. He was with us in week 1 as well, while Bernard joined us also in the previous week. So welcome everyone, together with Professor Skoulos, of course, our scientific coordinator. We like to see that many of you have your cameras on. Thank you for that. Keep your microphones off unless you want to take the floor, of course, and check the chat box for any questions or anything you want to exchange. Some updates about the numbers of this e-course. We had from the beginning more than 150 applications from 50 countries. Since the first week, gradually the number of course participants that actually are in progress with the course content is increasing. So we are now around 2/3 of the people that registered are in the progress of learning. Which is really, we're very happy about this number. It's above average in e-courses. And already 2 of you have uploaded your assignments of this final week. Thank you for that. 3. Yes, and one a few minutes ago, Candace, if I remember well. So strong points of the previous week, week 2, was meeting with the experts, the case studies and the examples shared from the grassroots level and the practitioners. That even if it was a bit technical, with the experts' explanations, the content was understood. And to some of you, it was more clear how important is the role of a stakeholder in integrated management. Also, the sharing of challenges is interesting and useful, one of you said. Okay, it was a little bit technical for the non-experts, and one commented on the time. The time needed to be devoted. Yes, we know that. So coming to week 3, we have a presentation from Bernard on UNESCO and education for sustainable development, how ESD is practiced in various designated sites of UNESCO. We have some texts, an article of Professor Skoulos on ESD in the Mediterranean with an emphasis on water. we recommend a series of resources that you can browse on your own from Medis and other stakeholders. And this week we also have the assignment that has to do with another project on climate change education, an Erasmus Plus project that Mio leads. And I will talk a little bit more on the assignment in case if some of you haven't browsed already to check it out. But just note on the chat, how many of you have started, are almost done with the content, or submitted an assignment, just to check the level of your progress so that we have an idea. So note down in the chat from not from 0, from 1 to 4, from 1 to 4. And Vicky, can you help me with the numbers? So the question is, how much have you progressed with the e-course content? And you know,
we had a wide variety of answers, a few thirds, twos, ones.
okay. And I know that we have 3 assignments completed. Okay, some clarifications about the assignment. So this acronym PARQUET, the full name is Physical and Augmented Reality for Climate Change Education. So we share the one of the basic outcomes of the project is a traditional educational material that contains a theoretic part on climate change and the 25 learning activities. This is something very fresh for us. It was just published in the webpage a few days ago. So we thought that this would be a nice opportunity, since we're talking about education this week, that you browse in the recommended learning activities that have been developed by the consortium, and choose one that you find appropriate to use for a specific audience, and justify in one page or in a few slides why you choose the specific activity, what adjustments and modifications you would make to use it, and optionally what recommendations you can make us to improve the activity. So in order for you to complete, you submit your assignment, and you will be graded. You will be given a pass mark, and in order for you to complete the whole course and download your certificate, you need to have in mind that you need to do 3 things: to submit your assignment. So you will find the button in the unit, to fill in the evaluation survey, that is a Google form. So every week through the Padlets, you do an informal evaluation, but in this final week, we want the formal evaluation through a Google form. It's again anonymous, but it is more elaborated. And don't forget at the bottom of the unit to check every time, complete and continue, so that the platform knows that you have gone over the content. So once you have done all that, you will see this sign that is like a certificate, this rounded symbol, announcing to you that you have completed the course. The deadline for submitting the assignments is actually one extra week. We give you an extra week. So it's next Sunday, the 23rd of February. And once you have done all that and you have been graded, you will see this mark. And once you click on it, or once you click on your certificates that you will find under your name, you will be able to download your certificate with your name. If you have any problems with this process, just email to us. That's all from me. So I will stop sharing. And if you don't have any questions about the process of completion, I will give the floor to Professor Skoulos.
Is there everything, is it clear or you need some further clarifications, even now or later? But I believe that Euro covered everything. I'm very glad we are together again, and I'm particularly thankful to UNESCO and two persons from UNESCO, very dear friends, both Bernard and Samuel, who may take the floor first because there are some questions addressed to them, or they may choose whatever question to start to answer. I see that there is an additional request. Is that right, Ekaterini Mandadaki? You ask for the floor? No.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So perhaps Bernard, you would you like to start, or you want me to start? Whatever.
No, I can start. And
Yes, fine. Thanks.
yes, there was one. I mean, there was one particular question that was asked to me in
Yeah.
Slido, um, whether I had in my ESD activities I'd interacted with various, let's say, various stakeholders, various groups of people, and how do you, in a way, adjust to the needs of those audiences, and how would you characterize those? So yes, an excellent question, because it's true. I've been working on ESD for at least 20 plus years, and so I've encountered various groups of people, various types of people. But before I actually answer that, I would like to make two quick remarks on some of the things that were discussed last week. One part of the discussion last week was looking at technology and AI, and I think one thing we need to remember um, is that sometimes some quote unquote traditional things or old things work just as well as any of these new connected things. I'll take one example, which I'm sure Professor Skoulos and a few others are aware of. One of the ways of getting water into Athens is actually an old Roman aqueduct that was built in, under the Emperor Adrian, the same emperor who had the wall built between England and Scotland. And there are a number of these aqueducts in various parts of Europe that are still working. They do not require electricity. They just require, that they are kept clean. Another similar example comes from Spain. When Spain was El Andalus, um, some of those aqueducts or let's say water irrigation that had been put in place by the Romans were taken over by the Arabs and were perfected, and they still work. The only problem is that you need to, keep them clean and keep them going. So that's one example. The other thing regarding AI, last week there was some questions about energy and water. Is that yes, we need to throw that discussion into the discussions we have, because it seems to me that currently a lot of discussion on AI is more on the tip of the iceberg. What can it do for us? What can it do for the planet? But actually, the larger part of the discussion should be what is it costing us and what is it costing the planet in terms of environmental, human, and social, both impacts and costs. And in terms of water, these huge data centers that need to basically give you that quick, ChatGPT question that you have, and in 3 seconds you get this wonderful resume of everything that's been said in the last 3 weeks. Well, that does come in with a cost of a lot of water being used. So I think these are some things we need to think about and remember, which brings me into starting to respond to the question. Variety of audiences, variety of targets. This is, for me, linked to the need when you're talking about ESD, educating on environmental issues, we have to look at that from different perspectives. I've already mentioned one, historical perspective. Old aqueducts still work. It's this. You also need to look at it from the sustainability perspective, the human rights perspective, the gender perspective, which means that when you're interacting with various stakeholders, the first thing is to have let's say, a dialogue with them to start to understand who they are, where they come from. I had a slide in my thing saying you need to know where you come from so that you can move on towards the future. And you have to adjust your language to that audience. For more than 12 years, I was an adult volunteer with the US Girl Scouts here in the Paris area. And Girl Scouts, they start at 2, 3, and they go up to 18, 19. So talking about environment, you have to adjust to their level. A 5-year-old, the environment at all. I want to see the big bear or the big elephant. Trying to go into minute things about, let's say, water quality. No, they don't. They don't understand. But you can start teaching them some things. As you move up, you need to make it more complex. And I would say it's a bit the same thing when, UNESCO, we work a lot with ministries of education, and over the last 20, 30 years, every big global meeting on education linked to sustainability is, yes, we have to integrate environmental issues, climate, water into the curriculum at all levels of the education system. On paper, it's very easy to say, but then you have to go and talk to the people in the ministry. And the way you talk to somebody who's a school director is not the same way as you talk to the minister or the people in between. Because I think that's the other problem, is that most people think the education system is like a big triangle, big solid block. But no, it's different parts, and often the middle part, i.e. the middle management, uh, is the one that is often the one that causes problem, quote unquote. It's the same with, Ministry of Environment, you'll find the same thing. Ministry of Agriculture, most ministry, middle level management always tend to say, no, but we've been doing this for years, it works, so why should we change? Which means that the progress in terms of the SDG 4.7, which is the one that deals with education for sustainability, at times doesn't seem to be moving. Because you can have the minister, the top management saying, yes, of course, the teacher's ready to do it, but then if in between there's something that doesn't come true, there's a problem. It's the same, can go back to the water example. If you have a pipe and you have some holes in the pipe, you won't get the same amount of water at the end. You also have to look at the question of, what are the priorities of those groups and what are their needs? And some needs might not be the same, because they have to be aligned with what is happening around. I'll take an example. About 10 years ago, we did a pilot in Cambodia near the Tonle Sap Lake, and it started out at we had developed this training material on multiple perspective on ESD. Let's train teachers. So the discussion started with getting teachers to come to this training session and to focus in particular on biodiversity. After a few discussion, what came out was that the teacher said, yes, even our government is telling us we have to protect the biodiversity in Cambodia. But when we are teaching in the classroom, we barely talk about the biodiversity in Cambodia. We talk about the Amazon forest, the Great Barrier Reef, what's happening in Africa, but we are actually not teaching about our own biodiversity. So if we expect students to and others to protect our own biodiversity, we have to find out more about it. So they actually went about rewriting the secondary school biodiversity textbook to focus more on the biodiversity of their own area, along with having elements about biodiversity elsewhere, because for them, it made sense that you would have to um, make it local. So yes, in terms of activities I've done, one of the issues is to actually focus on what are the local needs, because then you can also get in the buy-in from the local communities, from the parents, the teachers, and you can also see some results. Because every time all these big projects, whether UN or EU or whatever, they always want results. We want the impact. What's the evidence? The best evidence is when at the local level, that's where you can actually show results. It's very difficult to show results at the country level, especially in terms of education for sustainability, because the environmental issues in one part of the country are often not the same as in another part. But also to respond to, there was a question on um, alluded to, how do you ensure consistency um, and quality? I think there it's just that for what UNESCO has been advocating are some kind of basic, let's say, basic principles slash, I'll call them modules, for lack of a better word. Some of the things that everyone should know. Doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter what, let's say, biodiversity surrounds you, but there are some of these simple, or I won't say simple, but some of these principles, some of these ideas that have to be integrated and be absorbed by everyone. So a number, I mean, if you go on our UNESCO online library and you type, education for sustainability training materials, you get several pages of those. But the one thing that's common to all those is that there are these basic similar type of things, a similar type of let's say knowledge, skills, values that we should all know. And then the second part often is more specific to the particular area. We've done training manuals for dry land countries, ESD in mountain areas, ESD. I mean, we even did one over in the Mediterranean. So that's part of how I approach things. The other way I approach these different groups is also to find ways to provide examples that they will understand. If you're talking to a minister or government official, you need to provide some examples that where other government officials were involved for them to actually understand or make make sense. But then sometimes you can use more simple things. I mean, the best would be you this this sessions have been focusing on water management and water issues, bring them to a place where there's a problem and show them there. That's not always easy, but you can also do it with images. Um, these satellite images of areas where you can see over the last 10 years, the size of the lake has either shrunk or gotten larger. Most of the time it's shrunk. Um, to say here concretely, there's something that needs to be done. The other thing is also that you need to find ways to make it, let's say, exciting. Um, and that's where, again, this idea of multiple perspectives comes in. You can You can address things, of course, you have to have the scientific facts in, but then the way you get teachers or trainers to deliver that, you need to bring in other approaches, things that are more creative. Um, Now that we're doing more and more things with virtual, virtual reality is a great way to be able to show things. We did some projects in Central America with primary schools and on ocean education, ocean literacy with virtual reality, so that the school children could be shown different marine areas from around the world without having to travel there. But also virtual reality is also can also provide ways for you to try and solve problems. You can be given some tasks and figure out which is the best way to approach thing. So modeling things. I think the other thing is also we tend to, in any project, we tend to want to do everything. And we need to tend to want to complexify everything. And actually, we need to basically make it actually simpler. Um, I've been in discussions on in the last few years. There's been a number of action plans, global frameworks on this and that, and in for some reason at the beginning, everybody wants to have that framework cover everything, solve every problem. Anything water, we will solve everything. No, it's impossible because you need to bring in different stakeholders into the discussion to actually implement it. And that's where things become more complicated because each group has a different way of saying. So often they're saying the same thing, but they're not using the same words. And then you get confused by the words that are used. So you need to break that. And to do that, you need to try and make things simpler. So what are let's say, the main issues? Of course, clearly there'll be a portion that has to be about training and capacity building. There's clearly a portion that needs to be about monitoring and evaluating whatever progress is being made. There's a portion where the one thing I would say the first step is you have to map what is already going on and how could you maybe partner with others to do things. So approaching various groups and various audiences is in part you as let's say, the project implementer, you have to do in a way your homework and find out a bit more about these groups to start a dialogue. The first day or the first step is not that you already say, okay, we have to make this project in such and such. It's to actually talk with people. You need to make that connection because otherwise you will move very quickly into complexity and it'll be the never-ending story. I think there was also, oh yes, I love the person asking in a way which have been the most famous experiences in water education. Well, it really, there again, it really depends on what, uh, in a way, what motivates you and what are your interests. I mean, I've had some great water education and other experiences, notably working with UNESCO associated schools. Um, Again, many years ago, we did a project involving 16 countries and all their associated school called the Great Volga River Route, which was basically looking at the Volga River and how it had been influenced through history, environment, to do exchanges, to talk about, yes, water issues, but going beyond the water issues. Um, as I mentioned in my presentation, water can be linked to storytelling, can be linked to tales, to folk tales, and other what are called living heritage approaches. So for me, that was a great experience. For some other person, it might be something about some project on water quality. So there again, it varies. And there was also again, oh yes, a question about water education in Africa and how to basically harmonize, strategize it to meet the standards of ESD. Okay, that's the question of standard is can can be a simple one, saying, okay, in the country has a curriculum that has these standards, and then the education on sustainability should meet those standards. Or it could be a more complicated one, saying, well, what are the exact standards, which should be in part following some of the discussions that um, have been ongoing lately. It's more about the issue of how do we change behavior of people. Uh, many places, many organizations are saying in a way, one of the ultimate goals of ESD is that we change our behavior so that we address the climate issue, the biodiversity issue, we live within planetary boundaries, etc., which goes into behavioral science. And so if the standard is that, how do you measure a change of behavior? There again, on paper, it's very easy to say, oh, yes, we'll measure change of behavior, but how do you actually do it? What is the indicator for that? Which there are numerous discussions on that, but there I would I'll come back to you need to keep it simple, because you have to remember when you're asking countries, or whether it's the central government, the local government, to measure some of these indicators, they have to be able to collect the data to measure those. And in some cases, if you do not provide a way to collect that data, it can be a great indicator on paper, but you'll never get any results on it. And in particular, if it's to be collected by a central government institution, if they don't have that within their software, let's make it simple again. And one more column on your gigantic Excel table, then you won't get the information. So again, in terms we are dealing with different audiences who have different needs. So first step is you need to have a dialogue to understand some of these needs and some of the priorities. Then you also have to be able to provide some things that I would say are kind of basic building blocks, which need to be put into a language that is simple enough that it can be adjusted, adapted, both to other languages, but to other situations, which is the problem of a number of learning and teaching materials that some appear in various countries. Some of them are just too technical. And if it's too technical, you lose people. It gets too, people start reading it and like, oh, no, this is too technical. It's not for me. So you need to keep that language as simple as possible. You also need to, in that exchange with the various audiences, you have to remember it's a question of connecting with other people. It's a question of communication, that's where storytelling comes in, of explaining or showing different examples, but also making that connection so that you, as the, let's say, project manager, project facilitator, can see who could be your, let's say, I'll call them allies, quote unquote, in bringing together other organizations, other groups to work with you on that particular projects. Because you need to be able to establish multi-stakeholder groups that can work together towards the same goal. So you need to be able to ascertain that. You, and then in terms of, yes, it's back to this question of strategizing so that it meets the standards. I think this idea is more trying to see how you can, let's say, yes, adjust or to some of the elements within an ESD curriculum or an ESD guidance. I'll put some elements into the chat. Last 6 months ago, we released a greening curriculum guidance, which was built from consultations, several months of conversations on what are some of these basic key concepts, elements that should be put in. They cover water is one of the elements. We also uh, released a green school standard guidance, because for us, talking about water, talking about climate, talking about ESD, it's not just in one classroom. It's not just part of the curriculum. It should become part of what a school is. It should be part of the DNA of a school or a educational institution. So yes, you can talk about water in the science class, but for us, no, you should also talk about water in the literature class, in the language class, in the math class. Yes, math. I remember primary school math problems where you didn't close the tap well, how quickly your bathtub will overflow, type of thing. Yeah, you have to talk about it, but then you also have to apply it to the educational institution, whether it's a school or even a university. How are you managing your water supply? How are you ensuring, the procurement and all those other issues? So this is kind of a quick intro to some of that. And I think the last part, I want to really emphasize the part about it's really about connecting with other people and other organizations to better understand each other. And that's where that particular slide I put in about knowing where you come from comes in, because it also is based on your own experiences, on your own approaches to, in particular, this issue of dealing with water. Just to finish, I'll just, again, two examples. My grandmother on my mother's side, her first job was to be able, basically, this was pre-World War One. She she washed clothes for people. And then when she was doing that at the public washing place, she had to learn how to manage water. And then, so I remember every time we went to her, stay with her, it was always, remember, you have to turn off the tap. You shouldn't waste water. She had a small garden when she had a particular way of watering the tomatoes, where she'd put the water, then she'd put the little stones to block the water from going, leave it there for a while, then take the stone away and move it, let it move further. So that was one way of dealing with managing of water. The other, which was a kind of it's a lesson you learn with your own family. The second example is I go back a little more. My great great grandfather on my father's side was one of the engineers that worked on building a canal between one of the rivers in Provence into Marseille, the big Marseille, the huge city, um, where the whole issue was the city needed better water supplies, and where there you had to be, because it was an engineering project, you had to be very, let's say, uh, you had to follow rules, you had to follow procedures. It was, which means that in terms of water management and other managements of environmental issue, there are certain things, there's certain rules and procedures that you do have to follow. You have to keep, figure out the right quantities. Why is the Roman aqueduct still working in Athens? Because the Romans that figured out the correct slope so that the water would flow without any problem. So there again, it's your own experiences or the things you've heard that comes into how you approach projects. So remember that human aspect of the things, not just the scientific fact, the engineering facts. So this is some quick remarks. I might have others as the discussion goes on. And in the chat, I'll put some links to some documents related to what I've just said.
Thank you so much, Bernard, for this excellent intervention. I may say accumulated wisdom. And at the end of the day, to be a good teacher, you need two things. First of all, to have your heart in the right place, to also understand that what you believe in one or another way is coming out. So you have to convince others, you have to be convinced yourself about what you are talking about, even if sometimes you don't have full knowledge of everything. But at least you have to recognize what you know and what you don't, but guide people to the right direction. I think that I agree with every single thing that Bernard said. Every. I just, before asking Samuel, I just want to make one or two remarks on the remarks of Bernard, and, because he touched upon three of the questions. And two things. First, an information. Not only I know, of course, about the Hadrian aqueduct, but we are using this now. It is not, this system brings in water which is not of good quality to be potable water. So because of the leakages, because of many other things. Now, what we are going, and when I say we, I mean the Global Water Partnership in cooperation with the Mediterranean Information Office, we are going to use this water in agreement with the Water Supply Agency of Athens and the Olympic Stadium to use this water for watering the lawn, the grass in the stadium, which is a huge area. And use also, I hope, that we can also have a small office there, a small stand there for schools to come and see what we are doing and all what Bernard explained about the old modern, inspiring actually using this kind of structures that we also describe in the Hydria project as not as acts of nostalgia, but as acts of inspiration and also admiration of some of the old techniques. We have as you know, the world network of water museums, where Hydria and MIO are among the founders of this organization, exactly because we need to always link culture and the achievements of previous generations in order to get not only inspiration, but also really lessons about the economy, about the efficiency and economy of natural resources. So it's very, very important what he said. And by the way, perhaps all of us some of us who are in this area for many years had first-hand, let's say, impressions from our childhood. Because we had as a family a small country house, not connected to the network of the water network. There was no not, water network there, not even electricity. And we used to have a cistern collecting rainwater or buying water with a truck coming. So we had this water also, believe it or not, for as potable water. And in order to be safe, we had limestone that we added there, and we had also yield in the system. And these two actually reduced all the problems, all the eventual infections or whatever, contaminations. And the water was used and reused because the water we had for washing dishes, we used it in the toilet. And this is something that now, with all what we are discussing, this is more or less in a more systematic way used when we are talking about reusing water and also so this and we actually try to save water also for the plants. So we treated the plants as part of the family with their own needs. So this is something that as a child of 4 or 5 years old, I started being there and participating in this economy, played an important role also, in shaping my character. Now, before one thing I wanted to clarify with what Bernard said about complexity. This is a very difficult issue, the complexity. We need to have two things at the same time. We need to simplify things, but not disconnect them from the cluster that the modern society should have in mind. What I mean is that complex systems cannot be solved in many cases, not always, by simple solutions, because there are so many interconnections. We need, therefore, from the beginning, to understand the complexity and the way out in a systemic thinking. So the system is that I'm sure the same we say with Bernard. I just want to clarify that when we are talking about simplicity is in the way we give the message. In messaging, we need to be clear and with no, let's say, too many questions. We scientists always we have more questions than answers. The issue is that we decide on something that is already clear for us. It has a scientific basis, so we give an answer at the moment. At the same time, asking everybody to think. So we need to have the critical thinking, and in this way, many times, we may come back and say, well, this is the answer. This is the direction. But also we may have A, B, C different directions, or these directions are already tested and are excluded. Particularly now we have so many questions about, again, about climate change or energy or energy priorities and mixes and these kind of things. We have to say what science actually supports. Now, before I move more, I would like to ask if Samuel has to reflect on some of the questions or some of what we said already, Bernard and myself, and then I will take some of the one by one the questions.
We can't hear you, Samuel.
You can hear me? Okay, so okay. Thank you very much. I think this is a very interesting discussion, and I think Bernard already, addressed a lot of these questions, especially on the water education bit. I think this is very dear to UNESCO, and it has been one of the big intersectoral activity between science and education. Somebody asked a question specifically on water education that is done in UNESCO across the world. We have been doing really our best to make sure that when it comes to the curriculum development, when it comes to the way water science is delivered in schools, it really mainstreams the issues that really matter. I remember when I worked in Nairobi office, there were a whole lot of discussions around technologies that can, for instance, improve water quality. There were a lot of discussions around borehole water, because in these countries, a lot of especially in the urban areas, everybody is digging borehole water. And so it just happens that you have some areas where there's the water abstraction is so high that even the government's ability to supply water, because they also tap on the groundwater resources. And there was a huge issue about even people having boreholes paying water bills, and you could, even though it took a bit of a political angle, you could understand that people understanding of how groundwater resources work and how everybody tapping into it can also result in scarcity of this resource. You could see that there's a level of education that was very limited in that sense. When you go to also some of the drought-stricken areas, like in the Sahel, it took a bit of time for people to understand that they could even harvest rainwater and it could be stored and then used in times of need. And so you could see that water education was really important, not just in school curriculum, but also making sure that even in the informal sector, like working with farmers and all the proper water users, to have a clear understanding on how this resource could be harvested, this resource could be conserved. And so this is one of the key programs within UNESCO, and we have a number of resources around this. And I think in the Venice office is also one of the areas that we want to be prioritizing from 2026. During the World Water Day on 21st March, we'll be discussing some of these issues in addition to water diplomacy and others, because I think it's really very important to prioritize water education. And then there was also a question which I didn't really, but let's see, there was a question on how to mitigate the impact of water-related hazards, like floods and drought. I think this is also a very interesting area. There's a lot of discussions around, nature-based solutions because, when it comes to climate change mitigation, there are all kinds of, technologies that are being piloted, but this is very context specific to, to different regions and to different countries. But just to say that I think nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation technologies are becoming really very topical when it comes to, water-related hazards attributable to climate change. There's also a call for all countries to have like early warning systems, climate information services. I think this is really, really very important, especially in regions that have a very high aridity score when it comes to water availability. Having climate information services mean that you are able to plan, your activities. So, for instance, if it is for farmers, we are able to plan it accordingly. And I think there is also a call to make this really very tailored because climate information and how it is interpreted differs with sector. How a pilot will interpret a 200 millimeter rainfall is very different from the way a farmer is going to interpret it. And so there is also a call for a more tailored climate information services that is also backed by some advisory service, especially when these interventions are, implemented in rural areas, especially where the level of education of the end users, like for instance, if you take farmers in Africa, for instance, where their level of education is really very low for them to understand and interpret the levels of rainfall that they have to receive and how that can inform the appropriate actions that they need to take before planting their crop. So I think this is also one of the ways by which we are trying to support our member states, through our IHP program, but also we have a program on disaster risk reduction that is, piloting a number of initiatives to be able to support, member states. So this is what I want to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel, very much. And I think your intervention and your comments are complementary to the ones of Bernard. And actually, it is very clear when Bernard was talking about, let's say, storytelling, and when you are include, let's say, necessary information about dealing with disasters and floods and some of the technical issues, we are talking about different audiences, different ages. And let me summarize a little bit that for our students. A good education on water, on the environment in general, climate, whatever, brings together three sets, if you wish, of knowledge and messages. One should be the core messages, which are principles important of universal value. The same when we are talking about the need for water economy, water efficiency, and the need to integrate policies of water issue with all other issues, energy, agriculture, health, and the rest. This is something that with different, perhaps, details is the same throughout the world. And this is very important that we, all of us, try to make sure that these basic messages are there. When we are talking, and this is for climate change, this is for all issues for biodiversity, loss on data. The second one is when we are talking about specific either climatic or other zones, spatial differences. It is different when we are talking about the Mediterranean or even the northern and southern Mediterranean because of the different water availability, water scarcity, and other things, which is not relevant, let's say, when we are talking about on that in the northern European countries or other parts of the world. And this is, again, something that you may use as example from other regions. But as it was said before, when we are talking about biodiversity, you may refer to other regions, but definitely you have to refer to your own situation, your own region to make it relevant. And third, there are important information which are not necessarily in the heart of education, but there are good examples of good cases of ways to solve problems, ways to address issues, where you take examples from the neighborhood, from the area, or from other areas as well as sources and other eras and other times. And this is what we have done already today, making, let's say, examples from other areas and providing, and this also helps in generating dialogue, in exchanging views and other things. But we should always remember that some of the basics that are universal are in the hard rock on which we build. This is the foundation on which we build the rest. And definitely the educator is, the role of educator is extremely important in bringing the different elements in a balanced way together and make them interesting, attractive, in order to keep the different audiences. Please, Samuel, please, Bernard, at any moment you wish, you may intervene. I try to take, Bernard answered the question about different diverse audiences. And we say that these audiences may be totally different depending on the different stakeholders and ages, and definitely we address in a totally different way school children, farmers, and more specialized groups. Also, he answered about, we discussed a little bit the issue of quality, consistency, and implementing water education programs in formal, non-formal, and informal education. Already these three types have different approaches and different opportunities. Again, what is important also there is the priority messages in messaging and the secondary, let's say, ones. And it is the quality, the question goes on saying if it is possible to have it at once. Definitely not. And it is not even, what is even more difficult is that even if you achieve at a given moment an optimum condition, education is so dynamic. The teachers, the educators change, the audiences change. You may have, and some of us had were very happy to have excellent teachers. I think that I was very, lucky having good teachers. Or finding them good, because I had classmates that that they couldn't extract the same things from the same teacher. But it is very, what I'm saying is that the same school 2 or 3 years later had a poor performance. And these things change. And you cannot, if you don't try all the time to keep it relevant and bring also some new elements and respond to the requests of the moment, you may have poor results. So this dynamic thing needs to be taken seriously. Now, on the material, also Bernard replied. I would like to say in a humble way that we have produced, and you have in your web page, a lot of material that we have produced on water, not alone, but with participatory processes, with teachers, with experts, with many different inputs. Please have a look, and I'm sure that you'll find many of them very useful, and you may even improve them. Now I go to the also the issue of Africa was tackled, and there is an issue of strategy. Here I would like to say that despite the differences, a good approach to whatever educational problems is the simultaneous grassroots, bottom-up and top-down approach. And actually, what we are doing in UNESCO, and also we in the Mediterranean region with the Mediterranean strategy of education for sustainable development, is exactly that. It is not really top-down, the strategies. The strategies are formulated by groups of stakeholders, of educators and others, and this is considered at a given moment by countries. So this is the so-called top-down, although it's not top-down. It's not only by few people, an elite of people who decide about that and is imposed on others. It comes through processes. So this process helps in building strategies that reflect to a certain extent the needs of the countries, of the specific audiences. Not always, not fully, but to a large extent. So we have this, and we have also the countries taking these frameworks, adjusting that, or even better, the educators themselves getting through some of these frameworks and make their own choices with some guidance. So this issue of the guidance is something that we have tried also in UNECE, and also in the Mediterranean. And the Africa, perhaps the North Africa is with the Mediterranean, and many times people from the countries come and challenge some parts of the strategy quite rightly, and we change them if there are things that can be changed. So I believe that you need to value as much as possible to use these documents as background documents, are not Bibles, and they change from time to time. But this is to some extent a collective expertise, a collective understanding of where we are and how we can move a little bit further, which goes beyond, let's say, just a school or just a ministry, and bring in problematics and experiences in a cumulative way. So this is what I had to say about strategies, and without putting emphasis on the strategies alone, but as tools within which you are invited to be creative. The other thing we have here is how long does it take to change local laws in according with international high standards? Can you give examples when national legislation adapts very quickly? I'm afraid to say that this is extremely difficult to answer. Every country has different schemes of adopting legislation, introducing rules, and this depends not only on the country's culture, but also on conditions and urgencies. I mean, many times I see for years and years that nothing moves, and then within a few months everything is solved. We had that with COVID. The introduction of online courses in Greece was next to zero before COVID, and now it is the one of the most common techniques. So what I'm saying is that in many cases, not only habits, but legislation changes to solve, urgent needs. There is no answer. At least I don't know if Samuel or Bernard wish to say something on that. Usually, the from the formulation of a policy to the adoption of a legal document on this policy is an issue of many years, not of months, of many years. And if you get to, let's say, to the European reality, where we have to agree with 27 member states in order to have something, sometimes this takes 10 years. And again, if it is something urgent, you may see it within months, but so there is no rule on that. The question to explain how to mitigate the impact of water-related hazards of climate change. So actually, what you may teach somewhere is how to reduce the risks, and this is useful. Otherwise, it goes into engineering or other things. But what we can say in reducing risks, it is actually, first of all, relying more on natural systems, nature-based solutions, and ecosystem-based approaches. And we see that also accepted by the Dutch, for example, who have started the engineering on waters. And now we go to allow for the for open, let's say, deltas. And it is useful in this sense to introduce a number of these principles on risks. Some of these risks can have also technical solutions, no doubt. For example, with earthquakes, in the past we had with relatively weak earthquakes, many damages, and now because of engineering solutions, we have reduced this a lot. Also, what? Yes.
Sorry, Bernard wanted to say something. Maybe you
Yes.
didn't see him.
Yeah. Sorry, Bernard.
No. So yes, on this the risk part, I think some of it goes back to what I was saying about we had a project in Vietnam where actually the part of the ESD they wanted to introduce was linked to disaster prevention, disaster risk prevention, notably in the southern part of Vietnam where they are confronted with frequent floods, flooding, and tropical storms. And part of what they did was that they, in each of the schools, because this was a program that was going to be spread throughout all schools in Vietnam, was to have a walk around the school with the teachers, the students, some of the city officials and parents to see, okay, the last time we had a flood, where did the water come from? And notice that, oh, we have some cement drains, but they're full of garbage and all that. So what do we have to do? We have to clean them up. We have to manage that. So some of that is also an approach where you have to involve several different stakeholders in it. I would say the other, now jumping to the issue of rules, regulations, and laws. You can have lots of laws, but as Professor Skoulas was saying, the implementation, the real implementation phase can take a long while. There are two simple examples. In 2004, there was basically a regulation that came out in France saying ESD basically should be compulsory throughout the education system. We're in 2025. There's still some school where it's not the case. So there again, the question is, why? Some of it comes to what I was saying, people behind rules and regulation, you have people, and you also have ways of how people interpret those regulations. Another regulation that actually we're celebrating the 20th anniversary here in France is about disability access. Every public building should have proper disability access, which is still not the case. There's always some excuse to say, oh, but this is an historical monument or building. We can't, change that. Or so the issue of interpretation of how do you interpret the rules is a key one. And in particular, in case of floodings. In the last 2 or 3 years near Nice and Cannes, there have been many villages that have half the villages gone because of floods. Part of it was what part of the village was basically destroyed. Places that were building permits were given on places that you knew that they would be flooded. They are risk areas. And the question is, why was that building permit given? Well, it was given because whoever was in the municipality and thought, oh, great idea, we need more people in our city and our town, so let's give the building permit. So yes, this question of rules and regulation is the same. There was a question linked to greenwashing and misleading campaigns, you can, I mean, there can be some regulations, but there's always ways to get around those regulations. And the big, I mean, the greenwashing issue is a major one. And even at the EU level, we're facing it. And part of it is because in Brussels, when our EU delegates meet and our EU people we voted for to be our representatives, there are also people from the lobby of either pharmacy or chemical industry or others. So again, it's a question of people, and it's a question of how do you actually interpret the rule that's given to you. It's the same with ESD. Yes, it can be integrated into the curriculum. It can arrive in the school, and teachers have had the training session, the information session, but then each teacher interprets what are the, let's say, the elements about water that they actually want to teach, and which ones do they feel will satisfy the rule, which in a number of European country, the rule is still that actually it's not so much what you know, it's how well you do on the test that will give you the points. And especially at the end of high school, you have this series of exam, and the higher points you get, the better off you can choose your university. So it's how do you interpret that? So yes, it's um, and then just to add to what Professor Skoulos was saying, I think the one thing we have to remember, we are in a constantly faster and faster changing world. So what we know today, based on the scientific facts and all the things, verified evidence from like 2 hours ago, might change within 2 hours because something else will have been discovered. So we have to also adjust to that, which means that it doesn't get reflected directly into your curriculum, because to change the curriculum, a national curriculum can take 4 or 5 years just to agree on what should be in it, and then you issue it, and then it needs to get implemented into the schools. Again, as Professor Skoulas was saying, you have this gap of time. And in the meantime, in the classroom, or if we're talking about non-formal education out there, by the river, you as a facilitator or educator, you have to find the ways to explain these facts, these scientific facts, and actually answer the questions of, in particular, um, teenagers who are more like, oh yes, well, climate change, all that. I can find that. I look on the web and I can find it. But concretely, what can I do, or what can I help other people do? That's in a way the key questions that we're getting more and more. So this sliding from the facts and the evidence to what are the concrete actions that can be done. But again, the problem is that we have this time lapse, and the fact that the things are getting more, changing constantly, getting more and more complex. To paraphrase an expert we had in one meeting many years ago, who said basically it's like trying to ride on a bicycle while an earthquake is ongoing, and you're trying to stay, balanced.
We can't hear you. And also just be
Yeah.
cautious of time that is running.
I think that we can take a few more minutes since it's the last one. I think that on what we both said, in order to give a more optimistic at a given moment note, is that um, the anxiety we have today in the society, which is evident everywhere, is because of the bitter gap, greater gap between the fact we all understand that the key problems in humanity remain the same for centuries, as we start from hunger or poverty or suppression or human rights or health or a number of things. And on the other hand, everything is changing so fast that we cannot follow. So these two, this is a big gap. And we as humans, as persons, individuals, but also as societies, we have a pendulum every day between these two. And we are bombarded from the news on both, on the problems that are not solved with wars and the rest, and on the other hand, on things that they change and we cannot follow. We have to have our mind to the basics. The education has as one, as we said, very important thing, how to learn to learn. So the first thing we have to teach, you have to teach, you have to approach all audiences, is to understand what are the universal values that are there and should be there, and what are the gadgets that may change and other things that add simple or very important aspects in our life. And actually, what we have given you with Parche is exactly that. Is scientific knowledge of today based on principles how to do it with all what we have done with the evolution of education from the beginning of environmental education to education for sustainable development and climate change and water and whatever. And actually, what we can do addressing specific audiences. It sounds very easy, it's not so easy. It sounds very difficult to some of you, it's not so difficult. It is doable, but you need to concentrate and think in a creative way on how to respond to that. I have 3 questions very quickly to answer. The one is about EU and other similar bodies, regulation. We've already to fight greenwashing and misleading campaigns. Bernard answered already. I just want to say the way out is through education. And I have given a PhD to one of my students. We decoded about 500 different advertisements and political messages. We identified the tricks that the different companies, advertising firms use, also with the support of some experts. And we show that to the students, where you put, when you have in an advertisement the picture up in the upper right or left corner is different, with red or green is different, with this kind of letters is different. And they became, within 2 or 3 hours of teaching, they became the Sherlock Holmes to identify where the different, tricks were there. And they started being very critical in reading actually messages. So we can do something also in this area as educators to enhance the critical thinking. Of course, the state also needs to take measures, although, as Bernard said, different interpretations may overcome and bypass the regulations. By the way, he mentioned something about lobbies. I give you now something that we suffer as an organization. There are extreme right groups now in the parliament that suggested that the funds to the non-governmental organizations and citizens groups and society be cut because they consider us as lobbies that inhibit development. And we have already this problem, a new problem, Bernard and Samuel, very new. So let's go, so to allow the other lobbies uninhibited. This is the approach. Now, the construction business to prioritize sustainability, we have to clarify that sustainable buildings are not necessarily more expensive than others, particularly if you put in addition to the construction, the maintenance and also the services. So asking for less energy to heat or keep, the house fresh during the summer or whatever. And also what we try to promote is the recycling of material. So construction and demolition waste is a very important source of natural source of also of revenue. And we try this, but this is more technical than normal, let's say, education approaches. Finally, how to overcome talking to the preached, the convinced. Well,
And then, sorry, there was also one comment in the chat from Jerel relevant to this question. So how do we to respond to those that respond negatively to the language of sustainability and also to climate deniers?
Thank you very much for this question. This is why I'm saying that some of the material we can provide, are convincing, very convincing. I don't know if you had the chance to give and show the impact of our activities until now, global activities, already having some impact despite the fact that are incomplete, that many countries do not follow and all that. So we have to provide, first of all, scientifically sound facts about the dangers, about the crisis we have, both with climate change and biodiversity. This is not to scare people, although it is needed to a certain extent, but also to provide evidence that our activities, our legislations, our policies have impacts, even if this is not as we plan, because this gives hope to continue. And we have to insist in giving proofs. Well, if there are people who deny, they deny either out of ignorance, and this is something we can fight, or out of vested interests. It's more difficult there because it is not something to change their mind. And in general, don't expect, because there was a question, I think Stephanie or someone asked how we can convince them that they have to do something over their interest or their profit. They will not. They may reduce the profit, but that's the maximum. The business are there to create wealth and distribute the wealth among mostly shareholders. So Uh, Also, the globalization of the economy, making each one of us to participate in that, because you have your money, little or more, in a bank. And the bank wants to remain alive, and they put their money to different projects. Indirectly, you participate in the choices of these banks, and the only thing you can do is to change bank. In financing, investing in several things. So with the type of economy we have and the competition we have, without knowing, we are also contributing to the principle of profit generation. So this is very important for us to understand and use our power as customers to make the best choices we can do, to be good consumers, to make our best, let's say, using this kind of power also to the right direction with ethical ethical grants, ethical investment, and all other things. We may have another time, another school to get into all these tools. I don't know if there is still unanswered question.
And we haven't given any people, the participants, the possibility to comment something or to say something. And
we will give this now for a few minutes if there is some opportunity, some request. Yes, we have one. Emmanuel.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Skulos. Yeah, I'm a student in Germany, Basel, University of Sustainable Development, and I'm studying Masters of Biosphere Reserves Management. And currently, I'm from Ghana. I want to find out. I asked the question of the impact of water-related, how to mitigate it on nature-protected areas. And I want to find out, can I use it as a study for my master's? I was thinking about how to do a research on that. Thank you.
Definitely you can. There are, I guess, many universities where you can have that. And if we can provide some references and guidance, with pleasure we'll do that. It's a big issue. We cannot discuss it now, but for sure, I think I would like to encourage you to go ahead with this kind of master.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Is there any other question? Apparently, we don't have other question. Emmanuel, you want again the floor, or it was from before?
Oh, sorry, it's okay. It's okay, sir.
Okay, fine. So I would like to thank all of you. I would like to thank Bernard and Samuel from UNESCO, who are with us always and share their vast experience and wisdom. Thank you all for being very good students. We wait to see the results of your work. We hope that all of you get the certificate and keep in the loop. And also, I would like to thank Iro and Vicky very much for all the work they have done for the hybrid university, and all those who have helped for continuing this very useful, I think, and innovative university approach. Those who had the chance to attend previous universities stay always practically in a community, in a family that is getting information and comes back with also your own contributions. Several of you, I know, are also members of youth groups and other groups under UNESCO schemes. And I would like to thank all of you very much. Bye-bye, and
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Bye.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 bye. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.